Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into something pretty radical, actually. It's a source advocating for a, well, really comprehensive shift in how we think about tech regulation, especially for adolescents. We're looking at a proposal from Dr. Howie Knopf. He's with Project Achieve Educational Solutions. And he's essentially calling for state laws, mandatory ones, that would require students to earn a social media certificate.
A certificate to use Instagram.
Yeah, basically, yeah, before they can get access to platforms like TikTok or Instagram. The core idea, the analogy he uses, it's simple, but it really hits home. He says, access to social media, it should be treated just like driving a car. Potentially dangerous, requires training.
So like a learner's permit for the digital world.
Exactly. That's the phrase he uses. Adolescents need a learner's permit.
Okay, and what's Dr. Knopf's background here? Why should we pay attention to this specific proposal?
Well, it's fascinating because his expertise isn't just academic. It's grounded in some really tough realities from the legal system. He's an expert witness, works on high-profile federal court cases involving schools, K-12 law, Title IX stuff.
Title IX, that's the sex-based discrimination law.
Right. But also, and this is key, cases involving, tragically, school shootings and physical assaults.
And that experience, that's where the really alarming context comes from, isn't it? He actually had direct access to the diary of an adolescent assailant in a major school shooting case, a nationally reported one.
Wow.
Yeah. And he describes these diary entries, explicit goals of destruction, just profound anger. But the crucial part, the assailant specifically pointed to school bullying and, importantly, peer-to-peer social media victimization as a big reason for planning the attack. Okay, so that definitely shifts this from just an interesting idea to, well, something potentially urgent, a public safety discussion almost.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack all the data he pulls together. You've got mental health stats, usage patterns, the actual harms platforms can cause. He sort of braids all this together, as he puts it, to build this very specific, very structured regulatory idea.
Right. So let's start with the foundation, the why. This whole thing is built on the mental health crisis among teens, right? Give us the numbers. Why is the current situation seen as such a failure?
Well, the statistics are, frankly, horrifying. Let's start baseline. Over 20% of U.S. kids ages 3 to 17 already have some diagnosed mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral condition.
Vision 5?
Yeah, but look at the trend, the rate of change. Since 2016, anxiety diagnoses are up over 60%, depression diagnoses up more than 75%.
75%.
Yeah.
In just over, half a decade. That's staggering. And you see it in how kids feel day to day, right? That 2021 data. Oh, absolutely. 42% of high schoolers reporting persistent sadness or hopelessness. Almost half.
And disturbingly, 22%, 1 in 5, seriously considered suicide in the past year.
And we have to highlight who's most affected here. The data shows consistently that female students and LGBTQ+ students report the highest levels of these challenges.
And they're often the targets online, too.
Exactly. It's happening while almost 20% of high schoolers say they're bullied in person and 16% online. So these platforms are basically pouring fuel on an already difficult fire. And that connection, between the distress and the access, that's really the anchor for this whole proposal, isn't it?
All right, it lines up almost perfectly with the rise of smartphones and social media itself. Access is just everywhere now.
It's near universal for teens. 96% of 13 to 17-year-olds have a smartphone.
But the really crucial shift you mentioned is how early they're getting them.
Right. Pre-adolescents, the 8 to 12 group, 61% ownership now. And the average age for getting that first smartphone, it's down to 9.8 years old.
9.8.
Yeah, that's 6 months younger than it was just 3 years before that.
So we're handing them the keys to this incredibly complex digital world before they're really equipped emotionally or cognitively.
And you see the result in their habits. This early, unrestricted access leads to, stunning usage patterns. Get this. Adolescents check their phones, on average, 174 times a day.
Wait, 174 times a day?
A day? That's up from 150 just the year before, in 2022. Think about it. That's almost 12 times every single waking hour. Researchers call it continuous partial attention.
That number alone makes you think this isn't just about parenting choices, right? It sounds more like a structural addiction issue.
And the engagement metrics back that up. 46% of teens say they use at least one of the big 5 platforms almost constantly.
Almost constantly.
Yeah. And if you add up all screen time, teens are averaging 9 hours and 12 minutes a day on various media.
9 hours?
With just under 2 hours of that specifically on social media platforms.
Okay, so they're spending huge amounts of time. But how does that connect directly to mental health decline? Where's the research link?
Well, that's where it gets really compelling. Researchers have found a pretty clear link between the time spent and mental decline. The Surgeon General's advisory in 2023, for instance, highlighted research showing teens spending more than 3 hours a day on social media. They face double the risk of poor mental health outcomes.
Double the risk. Okay. But you mentioned something earlier. The really critical threshold, the point where things start to go downhill, it might be even lower than 3 hours.
It is. Much lower, actually. Studies show mental health starts to significantly deteriorate after just 1.5 hours a day of recreational screen time.
1.5 hours.
Yes. So if the average teen is hitting 9 hours total and nearly 2 just on social media, well, you can see the problem.
The vast majority are way past that threshold.
Way past it. The platforms, you could argue, are almost designed to make optimal well-being impossible for the average teen user. They push them beyond that safety point. And historical research, like Dr. Jean Twenge's work, kind of confirms this timeline. She showed mental health declines really started taking off right when smartphone ownership hit 50% back in 2012.
Long before we really grasped the scale of this crisis.
Exactly. And the correlations got even stronger after 2015 when social media became almost universal for teens.
Okay, so the data clearly shows usage correlates with decline. But, correlation isn't causation. What are the specific harms? What are these platforms actually doing that hurts kids? Where does the current system, just letting them on at 13, demonstrably fail?
Well, the failure is really stark when you look at cyberbullying. It's fundamentally different from old school bullying.
How so?
It follows the victim everywhere, 24/7. Through their phone, into their bedroom, there's no escape. It leads to this chronic, ongoing psychological trauma, and often it's playing out publicly in front of potentially thousands of their peers.
And those victimization rates are climbing fast, right?
They are. 42% of young people now report being bullied online. That's up from 37% just in 2022.
Then the impact is devastating.
Dire. Victims are nearly 3 times, 2.9 times more likely to attempt suicide compared to kids who aren't harassed.
Yeah. And do specific platforms pose specific risks? Are some worse than others?
They seem to facilitate different kinds of harm based on their design. TikTok, for instance, because of its algorithm and that rapid-fire video feed.
It's mostly video, yeah.
It's now the most common place for cyberbullying. 67% of teen victims say harassment happened there. But what's really insidious about TikTok is the algorithm itself. Research suggests it can pull users into increasingly extreme or harmful content incredibly quickly.
How quickly?
Within just 2.6 hours of starting to use the app, it can effectively fast-track radicalization or exposure to really disturbing stuff.
2.5 hours. That's terrifyingly fast. What about other platforms, like ones used for more direct attacks or maybe exploitation?
Well, you have platforms like Discord. It's often less regulated, feels more like a private space. And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children reported a huge jump, 47%, in reports involving Discord just in 2024.
47% increase.
Okay, and then there's Snapchat. The whole disappearing message thing, it makes it incredibly hard for parents or schools to document bullying or threats. The evidence just vanishes.
Right.
And its location sharing feature, Snap Maps. That led to a 78% spike in GPS-enabled harassment reports between 2022 and 2024.
So the features designed to make the app engaging are actually being turned against users.
Functionally weaponized, you could say, yes.
And the ultimate tragic connection Dr. Novanoff makes is between this online victimization and real-world violence.
Yeah, he points out that it's not just that bullying happens online now, it's that these platforms act like global amplifiers for what might have been local conflicts. He cites data. 81% of school shooters had experienced bullying or social rejection before their attacks.
81%.
And in nearly 89% of targeted violence cases they reviewed from 2019 to 2023, the victimization happened both in person and online.
So it confirms that digital conflict is directly fueling physical tragedy.
It acts as a catalyst, yes.
Okay, so putting this all together, the takeaway seems to be that just telling kids to be careful online or relying on that age gate of 13, it just hasn't worked at all.
It completely failed, according to this perspective.
So the solution Dr. Knopf proposes isn't just better moderation, it's this whole structural overhaul based on proven competency. Tell us about this specific prototype he lays out.
Exactly. It's a comprehensive state-mandated certification program. You have to prove you're competent before you get independent access. It's a two-tiered system, deliberately mirroring how we handle driver's licenses, with graduated licensing.
Okay, step one.
Step one is the social media learner's permit. This would be aimed at kids around age 15 or maybe 10th graders. And this permit would only grant access to what the proposal calls Tier I platforms, the ones with the strictest monitoring.
Okay, sounds reasonable. But what do you actually have to do to get this permit? It sounds like more than just asking your parents.
Oh, much more. Parental permission, written permission is required, yes. But that's just the start. The student has to pass a 40-hour social literacy education course,
40 hours.
40 hours, and then pass a state-regulated exam on that material with at least an 80% score. They also have to sign a social literacy contract together with their parents.
A contract outlining rules and responsibilities, I assume?
Presumably. But here's the really novel part, the financial piece. The parents have to take out a specific social literacy rider on their existing home or umbrella insurance policy.
An insurance rider for social media use. Explain that.
Okay, let's pause there for a second on the insurance rider bit.
Yeah, that jumped out at me too.
Because it's a really key part of this. It's not just like paperwork.
Right. It's about making it real, financially.
Exactly. This is the mechanism designed to attach tangible, real-world financial risk to what happens in the digital world. By requiring this rider, the state is essentially making parents financial co-signers for their kids' online behavior.
So if the kid causes harm online, like serious cyberbullying or defamation.
Right. The resulting financial liabilities, say, a legal settlement or a court judgment could potentially be covered by or at least impact that insurance policy.
Which gives parents a very strong incentive to actually monitor and enforce the rules.
A direct financial incentive for oversight, yes.
Okay, the intent there is crystal clear. Link digital actions to real liability. But let me play devil's advocate for a moment. A 40-hour course, a state-proctored exam. Is this actually feasible logistically? Won't this just crush schools that are already overburdened?
That's a really important question, a necessary challenge. The proposal does suggest this could be handled by approved third-party private organizations, similar to how driver's ed often works now.
Okay, so not necessarily run by the schools themselves.
Right. But the content of the course would be state-mandated. It would have to cover things like cybersecurity basics, understanding the psychological hooks, addiction mechanisms.
Recognizing and reporting cyberbullying.
Exactly. Understanding algorithms, how they work, and crucially, strategies for managing screen time effectively. It's focused on self-regulation and being a good digital citizen.
Okay, so that's the learner's permit. What's step 2? The full license, so to speak.
That's the social media certificate. This typically comes later, around age 17 or 12th grade. Or an 18-year-old could pursue it without parental consent, but they'd still need to pass the advanced course and presumably maintain that insurance aspect until they age out.
And this certificate grants broader access.
Yes, this gives access to all platforms, including the less regulated Tier 2 platforms, but it requires more advanced learning. It builds on the permit course, adding things like managing your long-term digital footprint, developing digital empathy skills, more sophisticated security practices.
And the assessment is tougher too, I imagine.
It is. It's not just a written test. It includes practical skills tests, maybe using online case studies or even real-time simulations of tricky social media situations to prove actual competency.
Okay. And how is this enforced, especially during that learner's permit stage on the Tier I platforms?
The proposal calls for required automated behavioral monitoring systems built into those Tier I platforms.
Software watching for problems.
Essentially, yes. Backed up by human review, importantly. Looking for cyberbullying, harmful content, violations of the rules. And just like traffic tickets, specific violations would lead to consequences, temporary suspensions, or even permanent loss of access privileges.
And this whole certification requirement, it lasts for a while.
It does. The proposal suggests it's required until age 21 for full, unrestricted access to all platforms.
21. Okay. Now, this sounds like a massive undertaking for states. Is there any existing context that makes this seem plausible? Are states already moving in this direction?
Well, it's definitely a big leap, but it's not happening in a total vacuum. States are pushing back against platforms already. You've got, over 40 states now involved in lawsuits against major social media companies, arguing they've contributed to the youth mental health crisis.
Right, like that big bipartisan suit against Meta last fall.
Exactly. 33 states joined that one in October 2023.
And schools are acting too, aren't they? limiting phone use during the day.
They are. We're up to 34 jurisdictions, 33 states plus D.C. that have taken formal steps to limit phone use during class time. So there's institutional acknowledgement of the harm.
Well, there's a gap, right? They might teach about digital citizenship, but nobody requires a test or certificate to actually get online.
Precisely. Some states mandate digital literacy instruction, New Jersey, California, Texas, for example. But none currently require a standalone certification as a prerequisite for platform access. That's the gap Dr. Knopf's proposal aims to fill.
So how would the state manage this, according to the plan? What's the accountability structure?
On the state level, it proposes a social media register. Basically, a database tracking who has permits or certificates, any violations, suspension details.
Like the DMV keeps driving records.
Exactly like that. And critically, the state would oversee that mandatory digital social media insurance program we talked about.
And that insurance pool would cover what exactly?
It's envisioned to cover the real-world fallout, damages from civil lawsuits related to online harm, emotional distress claims, even funding for mental health services for both the perpetrators and the victims.
Wow. And how would premiums work?
It would use a risk-based system. Your premium or your parents would be based on your violation history and your certification level. So cleaner record, lower risk, potentially lower cost. It creates a market incentive for safer behavior.
Okay, that makes sense internally.
Yeah.
But here's the huge question. How does a state, say Wyoming, actually force a global company like TikTok or Meta to block a 16-year-old who doesn't have a Wyoming permit or whose permit got suspended? Don't you need federal power for that kind of enforcement?
That is absolutely the critical friction point. The proposal acknowledges state action alone isn't enough. Platforms could just ignore individual state rules.
Right, loopholes everywhere.
So federal oversight is deemed essential. The idea is the federal government, maybe the FCC, maybe another agency, needs to hold the social media companies fully accountable for actually complying with these state certification programs.
Accountable how? What's the hammer?
Real teeth. Sanctions ranging from significant fines all the way up to potentially losing their license to operate in the U.S., or having their internet access restricted.
Like how online gambling or alcohol sales are regulated?
Similar principle, yes. The states set the competency standards. The feds provide the enforcement muscle to make the platforms obey those standards nationwide.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the source material's conclusion is pretty blunt, isn't it?
It is. It basically says the link between the teen mental health crisis and unrestricted social media access is undeniable, and we need immediate, bold action because what we're doing now just isn't working.
It's failed.
Catastrophically failed is the argument. The sheer amount of data, that 75% jump in depression, the 174 daily phone checks, that 1.5-hour threshold where things decline, it all points to the current system, just based on age and hoping parents can supervise, being completely inadequate to protect kids from documented harms. Psychological harms, and sometimes tragically, physical ones too.
So the final thought to leave everyone with, building on this. If we all pretty much agreed decades ago that something as powerful and potentially dangerous as a car-needed education, graduated licensing, serious regulation to protect public safety, then what's the real cost of keeping the current system for social media, this system of unrestricted access, especially when all this data suggests these platforms have comparable, maybe even greater power over a teenager's psychological well-being?
Yeah, it's the core question, isn't it?
It really is. What's the cost of not acting? That's definitely something to think about as we consider how society should handle what might be the most powerful tool we've ever handed to teenagers.